Glad you're here with us on Morning Express. It's now time for the newsroom, where we look at some of the big stories, how we have covered them. Are there areas we could have done better? Are there areas that we could have highlighted a little bit more? But of course, also those that we have brought up and possibly handled well. You're welcome to participate in the conversation. Now, joining me in the studio is, to my extreme left, David Ohito, who is Standard Digital Editor. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
And Karibu Sana, you're well?
Niko Salama.
Okay. For a minute I thought you're, but you look okay. All right. Also joining me is Mwenda Kilemi, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi, and you lecture in the communications department, right?
Yes, I do.
Karibu Sana. Great to have you.
Thank you.
And yeah, let me start with you, Ohito, and maybe what stood out as a big story for you this week?
Well, this week has been very busy for the newsroom. Of course, the teacher strike,
which has been going on now for quite a while.
Yeah, for quite a while, was still the dominant story. And we've seen the suffering of our pupils, especially those in public schools, while their counterparts in private schools are enjoying learning. So really big story, still a stalemate. No further ground covered in terms of negotiations and reaching a return to work formula. So the unions have stuck to their guns. TSC, I think, lost ground yesterday when they withdrew their case from the Supreme Court. Right. And I think there's still no solution. It is the children who are suffering. And then we had the ICC prayers, a very mixed bag, a problem that has been with us since the last election. But I think that was just mere rhetoric talk and anger directed at the court that means good for us and for the world. But again, no much ground covered. And of course, you had the nurses strike also, which has been going on in this particular
different parts of the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
They differ from county to county. Other counties have borrowed money to pay health workers. Others have not. You saw in Nairobi County, the nurses taking to the streets. For me, I think those
are the main stories that stood out for you.
And of course, the bad story of the rapist doctor.
The rogue doctor.
The rogue doctor.
Okay.
Really a sad story. But I must commend our competitors, Citizen TV, for exposing that story, despite the ethical questions that came with it.
Okay. Wonderful. Mwenda, what are some of the big stories that stood out for you this week?
I agree with the stories that he mentioned. One thing we did highlight when we talked about this 2 weeks ago was the fact that other people are going to say they're going to strike. And that's happening already.
So we can already see it coming up.
Yes. Kotu just promised that they will also join the teachers if nothing happens. So everybody wants to join the strike. And as my colleague just said, unless the government comes up with something or people meet, it's only going to get worse. And it doesn't seem to be getting to a point where anybody wants to meet. TSC is saying that it's not even us who have the problem. The government doesn't have the money to give us. So you're really blaming the wrong people. And the teachers are saying they want their rights. A story that I think did not get enough coverage was yesterday that the police managed to detonate a bomb at Garden City Mall. If that had gone off, that would have been another disaster for us in terms of tourism and in terms of the view of terrorism in Kenya. So I think maybe that's what should have been highlighted at a stronger level. The fact that the police actually are working and they are able to figure this out.
There's actually been quite a number of success stories of sorts when it comes to the war on terror. We remember there was the grenade that was detonated in Kiambu. We also have the forest that is being cleaned out currently, where they've been hiding. So there's been quite a lot that's been going on. Ohito, do you feel like possibly now that we're talking about the war on terror and this particular incident of Garden City Mall bomb being taken care of, do we highlight the bad stories more than the good, such that sometimes we take hope away from people, whereas we can see that there's actually progress that's being made?
Well, I must admit that there's very good progress being made in terms of neutralizing the terror threat, and I think there has been a change of game plan in the way our security operators work. For a very fairly long period, there's been relative calm across the country from Mandera to Lamu, and that shows you, I think the intelligence is getting back its act, and maybe our international counterparts are supporting us with the intelligence gathering and trying to profile and identify these bad elements in society. I think in terms of media coverage, there's really not much when the bomb has not gone off. You know, it's like you can't tell a story of a victory in a football match before it is played. So I think the media has just done its best to try and cover and highlight. But I agree with my good friend Kilemi here that it needs to be given attention. How the hell did it arrive at that populous mall? Those are begging questions that we need to answer.
Yeah, because one of the things that came out, especially when there was bombs going off in all sorts of places, is the fact that some of these bombs are being manufactured locally, or the whatever is required is being brought in locally, and the truth of the matter is somebody somewhere knows about it. So maybe should we be following up on some of these stories to now get the story behind the story? Find the bomb didn't go off and it was found, but how did it get as far as it did? And what's the plan? Which other mall might be targeted? Should that be something we should be exploring? I
think that's something that definitely should be explored, because also there's this issue of how these weapons are easily found in Kenya. They say that's still the case, so we need to follow up. Something else that we need to find out more about is there have been initiatives that were launched in the past, such as the Nyumba Kumi initiative. What happened to that? It was supposed to be, everybody thought that was a good idea. I mean, knowing your neighbor is a great idea, and it would go a long way into fighting terrorism, but it doesn't seem to have kicked off, or the initiative died off. So there are a couple of things they said that they would want the public to participate in, and I would want to know why none of those have really popped up as much as they should have. Okay, or the follow-up after Nyumba Kumi, you know, what happened? Was it ever followed up? Is there anything that happened? Do people know their neighbors? Maybe that's why we have bombs, you know, being made and being found too late.
Personally, I've been a very anti-Nyumba Kumi crusader. I mean, for me, it's an old-school way of thinking of things, formed by, you know, the old school provincial administrators, the Kagudis of this world. I think where the state of security has reached is to invest more in technology and not on those traditional modes of trying to find out who your neighbor is. I think if we go that way, then we will make lots of progress. There's no need, for example, putting several policemen in terms of traffic officers on the roads instead of just using cameras, as is done in developed countries.
That is true. And I would like to know why. I'm sure there have been attempts at taking them out of the roads. So why are they still back there? A couple of years ago, they tried to take the police out, and I mean, I know on certain days, when they are not there and the traffic lights are working, people follow the traffic lights.
And they actually flow. Yeah, the traffic flows very well.
And if we had intelligent traffic lights that know where the traffic is, so they block off certain roads to others, then it would kill off the argument they make that they know better because they communicate and they tell each other this road is bad, this road is bad. So I mean, I agree.
Okay, and maybe Ohito, talking about technology and investing in technology, Kenya has made steps in trying to invest in technology. For instance, now we have cameras all over the place. Maybe should we have researched a bit more to find out, first of all, are those cameras working? Do we have a central place? When we talk about this bomb being found here and another one being found there, is it possible that we could have followed the trail using those cameras of how it got there? Because I mean, right now they literally have a network which I imagine spans the whole road network in Nairobi.
I agree with you, and back to Kilemi's point, that is where the media should be focusing. Not that police have neutralized a bomb that would have gone off, but how did this equipment get assembled or get ferried to this particular place? And I believe that mall has CCTV cameras all over. We should be analyzing that, and we should be pressing the officers. How did you arrive at exposing this before you neutralize the IEDs or the explosives? Have you attempted to find out how they got here? Are there any suspects? Is there anybody arrested? And where were the security officers? There are guards all over in all malls over the place. Do they know their duty? Can they understand? Can they identify positively that we suspect so-and-so? Do they inspect bags? I think those are the questions that we need to start asking, and those are very
pertinent question.
The technology is definitely there. I would want to know why there's so much secrecy about what the technology they bought can achieve. I'll give you an example. I one time met an Israeli defense contractor, and he told me they had developed a scanner that could tell where a bomb was in proximity to a certain area. So they could actually detect the bomb coming towards them. So I wonder...
It's almost like a radar of sorts.
Exactly. So I would assume maybe the government has this technology already, and I would want to know why they're not telling us about what they're capable of doing and why not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe just exploring those CCTV cameras which keep flashing. We don't know why they're flashing.
Yeah, maybe they're not dysfunctional as we think they are. Maybe they're actually doing something. Yeah. Maybe there's something they're testing.
And I guess if that information came out, as much as maybe they may be saying it's state secret or it's security secret, I guess it also helps to become as a deterrent. Because anyway, they are visible.
Yeah, they're very visible.
Yeah, they're visible. All right, let's now go to the teacher strike. And this has been going on for a while. Ohito, do you feel like we have let the Kenyans and those involved know exactly what the issues are?
I think the problem of teachers has been there for very many decades. The challenge is that no government, both current and previous ones, have tried to find a lasting solution. Interestingly, the current president was the Minister for Finance, and those issues were very clear in his mind, in his docket. This is a problem that should not have taken this long. And if you ask me, the wars that we are seeing between the unions, you know, you don't get into agreements and then run out of them. If they knew there was no money, they should have said from day one that,
from the word go.
That we are unable to pay teachers. But what the teachers is asking for is also not a lot of money. It still can be done. When they hear that we need bailout for Kenya Airways at 68 billion shillings, and they're asking you only for 1.4 billion every other month, then, you know, those are pertinent questions. We need a very well-educated society. We still have gaps in our education system. We need our children back in school. And on this, I am with the teachers. You either tell them how you're going to raise the money. I'm prepared, like many Kenyans, to get tax to pay teachers so that we have a better society.
Better education.
But if we are going to have only MCAs, MPs, and parastatal bosses having good pay packs at the expense of teachers, then there's a big problem. However, we know the economy is strained, the economy is not growing. Perhaps we need to grow at double digits, 10%, 20, 11, 13%, to be able to meet all these budgets. But the challenge lies with the current government. How are they going to create jobs? How are they going to raise more money to be able to pay teachers? It's a very dicey situation, but they have run away from them. For example, been wondering why the president has been silent on this matter all this time. If really he is the president of the Republic of Kenya, he would not be in Italy looking for investors, because any investor would look at Kenya and say, but why aren't your children going to school? Why would I put my money in a country where children
where education is sort of not being given the front burner that it should be given? Mwenda, in terms of reportage and information that we have given to the public regarding the main issues here, we have a court that has, Supreme Court, that has ruled and said the teachers should be given, must be given their money. We have a government that is saying, look, you've caught us off guard, as it were. Yet it's been going on since what, 96, 97? So have we given the public enough information to actually know exactly what the issues are?
I was reading a World Bank report yesterday about the economic focus of Kenya, and they're very optimistic about Kenya. They say it's going to be the center of East Africa. It could even grow to be the center of Africa. But the one issue they mentioned is a problem is our wages. They said our wages are just out of control and it's not sustainable. So the public needs to be informed about what this really means. Does that mean the government has too many employees? We had the reports over the weekend that there are 40,000 people who should not be employed or part of the employment. Or does it mean that the money is being used the wrong way? There needs to be a discussion about that, what the government is saying, where this money is going to come from. Also, we need to look at the teachers. Almost everybody agrees that they deserve the money. Nobody disagrees they don't deserve the money. But the one issue they say is that some people who do agree they get the money is we don't see results. So is there a way where even if they do get the money, we can see some results. We can be guaranteed. They've fought this idea of performance contracting. They've completely fought. They don't want to hear anything about it. So maybe there has to be some give and take in that area as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a very critical point that we are missing, and I blame myself and my colleagues. There is a Salaries and Remuneration Commission.
Yes.
A constitutional commission
yes.
whose work and mandate is very clear-cut.
Yes.
But the moment we started by passing SRC through the National Assembly, deciding what their salaries are and so on, then we lost the whole ball game. So it's a commission that remains without, authority and confidence of the public.
It lacks the teeth to bite.
Yeah. And I think we need to address those. But conversely, if you look at the question, we have no money. Look at the amount of reports that every media is churning out on corruption, from wheelbarrows at 109,000.
Yes, we're going to come to that.
To outright plundering of public funds. I think if we just reduce corruption by just 10%, that's enough money to pay teachers.
But you see, as our responsibility as members of the Fourth Estate, really, we cannot enforce.
Sure.
But we certainly can highlight and make and encourage and also be the watchdog of the people and let them know. For instance, could we have done more in terms of highlighting the responsibilities of the SRC, even in a case like this?
Sure. I think the argument that TSC went saying that the SRC should be in charge of this issue was a correct argument. Unfortunately, the timing was bad. So it seemed like they were looking for an excuse. But as my colleague just said, that's not their job. It's not their job, and they can't bypass that body. Yeah.
Okay. There's also the nurses' strike, which are coming up everywhere. And like you rightly mentioned, we did talk about it when these strikes began, that there could be a ripple effect of this particular judgment by the court. And is that what we're seeing happening?
I think that's what we're seeing happening. Not to put the plight of any of the people striking at a lower level, but if you were to ask me, I would say I also deserve a raise. Everybody deserves a raise. And nobody ever says I'm enough.
I'm paid well enough. Right.
Everybody says I want more. And what the teachers are asking for, 50 to 60%, even if the nurses were to say, let's just give us 10%, it seems like a reasonable thing for them to ask for. So it is a ripple effect, and it's only going to get worse. More bodies are going to join. I am sure other people are also just waiting, saying that if this happens. And then it goes back to what you mentioned about the SRC. So what do they do? In that place, they're completely powerless. Because if they give in to that, they have to give in to others.
To everybody else.
And SRC will have been completely useless. Yeah. Okay,
Ohito, in terms of, we're accused of being reactionary. It's like we're always following something that happens. If an explosion, we follow it. Now, in regards to these strikes, and seeing that we actually did mention there could be that ripple effect, what avenues could we be looking at to either avert or at least to inform so that the public is aware? For example, now with the nurses' strike, we even have deaths reported. So it is a matter of life and death. So is there anything that we could be looking at as reporters, as the media, to highlight, to warn people and say, if this continues, this is what we should expect?
Yes, I think to that extent we haven't done really good homework, because we are constantly working under pressure to beat deadlines. A newspaper editor has barely about 6 to 8 to 7 hours to put a whole
together.
Yeah, whole newspaper together. And this with minimal resources, there's not really much time dedicated to going behind the story. It would be interesting, for example, to know what is the living condition of a primary school teacher in Nairobi.
Right.
How much rent does she pay? What does she spend on transport? What does she eat? What does it cost her? Compare that with a teacher in Mandera and say a teacher in Mandera earns this much. These are the allowances. So that we really tell the story. Does this pay really work out?
Yes, break it down to the
people. Yes, to understand. But we simply lump teacher strike from Nairobi to Mandera to Lamu. It's like a flat slate. We are asking just for 2,000, 3,000 shilling increase. and that really doesn't tell the story. But there's a bigger question also, which members of the public continue raising with us. Are teachers really in class? There are several reports by international organizations, including UNICEF and so on, who have said teachers spend minimal time in class. Have the unions addressed this? Have the inspectors or the regulatory bodies addressed this? What is the situation? I'm told every other teacher in the rural counties owns a motorbike, and they are on call all the time. So the phone rings and he says, time for homework now. He goes to ferry his passengers for 2-3 hours. Who is really in charge to ensure that teachers are doing the rightful job? Those in private sector schools, I mean, man, you must earn your pay and you work for every minute.
If you miss a day, they definitely know that you are not there.
Yes, but if you see the kind of arguments being put forward by TSC and the cabinet secretary, then you get fearful that the solution is as far as it may be.
Another angle that we have not looked at is the power of the teachers union. I mean, objectively, we should be more outraged that people are dying because there are no nurses around than that teachers are not teaching. But yet the teachers union has a way of always making sure they grab the headlines. And
could it be down to numbers? The fact that they command the power of numbers.
That
or should we call it the tyranny of numbers?
But over the last few months, we have been having issues with nurses from Mombasa to Meru, and fighting with governors or just not showing up for work. And all these issues have caused a lot of deaths. And I would think that's more of a loss to the country than
the teachers.
Than the teachers not teaching. Yet their unions, I don't know if their unions just are not as powerful. We don't get to hear, or they don't make a forceful case.
Is it the unions, or should we be the ones looking for that story? And because the media is accused or said to be the one that sets the agenda, could we be the ones putting the headlines? We're putting teachers as opposed to putting the health crisis, for example.
Well, sometimes bodies can force an agenda, and that's what's happening. What's happened with the teachers. So the nurses attempt, but they don't attempt as well.
I think, Mike, the theories of media also are facing a lot of challenges in the societies we live today. A good editor today is measured, including you and me, by how many people are watching this station now, by how many copies of the newspapers we are selling,
how many clicks you get,
not by what is the quality of the story that you are writing. What really is it that the earth-breaking story that you have brought forward this year, for example. So, and your measurement, the media houses, I always complain today, unlike when I joined the media 20 years ago, are now run by business profiteers who are at the helm. They are looking at the bottom line. How much money are we making? Is that story making a difference? Is it giving us viewers? Do we get sponsors for that show? That is the discussion. And like that time when we were saying, is this story really worth my headline as an editor?
Original reporting is very expensive, as he will tell you. It's extremely expensive. And we, as he said, we don't have the will as we did before to say we're going to give this reporter this amount of money. Don't come for a month or two, just get us a good story.
Make sure you come up with all the facts and everything.
We want something that happens quickly. And unfortunately, those that happen quickly don't have as much depth in them.
So, Ohito, would it be accurate then to say that we are also driven by our income, and as a result advertising and all that, such that it plays such a big role? We have to churn out the stories to get the numbers, to get the advertisers, such that now we are forced to, rather than follow up a story and give all that is required, we need to have this story on the headlines and as sensational as possible to get the numbers.
Yes, you're pretty right. Our content is really at the, being held by advertising and revenue and so on, so that we are ready to, disrupt or include or infuse commercial content when we're doing news bulletin, so that we raise salaries for ourselves and for the owners of the media house. But we are also working in very difficult times. I work online, and the things and trends I see are very worrying. That if you take a 700-word story, which is the headline, and put it online, the average reader only spends 3 to 4 minutes on that story. which translates to about 200-300 words. So the story, who is able to read 700 words? Those are begging questions that I think editors and media houses need to start investigating.
And don't forget, the pie is getting smaller.
Sure.
In terms of traditional media, more people are getting in there with the digitization of television. So you're fighting for a smaller advertising revenue. And as you said, new media, people have yet to really accept it and catch on to it as much as they should. Because ideally, there is no limit to how much stories you can put online. If people don't want to read them, he has no limit. He doesn't have like he has to do 20 papers. He can put as much as he wants.
Can do as many pages, but the online reader is not that patient to go through the whole story.
Yeah, and that is informed by maybe they don't have enough bandwidth, they don't have time, but it's all over with the newspapers. I rarely can count 10 people who can read the main story, which is normally 700 to 800 words from the intro to the last full stop.
Even on the traditional paper?
Yes.
Okay.
Not even editors like myself would sit down and read through.
Should we also be changing the way we do our newspaper? I was talking to somebody, and news has changed because of how fast we get it. For instance, if an accident happens on a certain road, via Twitter, within seconds, you can have it. So that becomes news. So should we be changing our dailies and our newspapers and even our reportage on TV to have it done in a way that we're giving more context? It's no longer a breaking news item per se, but it's giving the context of the item.
I was at the World Editors Forum in Washington, D.C. Early June, and that was the biggest discussion by all editors from the globe. And they're saying that the biggest challenge today is being a newspaper editor, because by the time you are going to press, what we used to call press time, all the content that you're going to print with has been on social media.
It's almost
been on live on TV, like your 24-hour news channel.
Right.
It's all over. How then do you make a difference when you wake up in the market in the morning? So very difficult. This guy has known the wheelbarrow was bought at 109,000.
He already
so
knew,
what are you going? What new thing are you going to tell them?
Right.
Luckily for us, we're not as badly off as American and European newspapers. Most of them are actually in debt or in losses. So at least we still have people who are loyal to the newspaper here. But the urgency of news, a lot of people now just get their news from Twitter, which has no ethical controls. I could print something that's not true, and often that's the case, and people spread it as wildfire, only find out it wasn't true.
And not just that. You know, I want to give a very interesting Kenyan example. That the news, God rest his soul, of the death of Fidel Odinga was broken not by a media house,
it was
but
on Twitter
by Robert Alai. And these bloggers are continually scrapping the space that was traditionally owned by media houses and newsrooms. So what point should I be waking here every morning, claim that I'm a newsman, when somebody else can break the news 2 hours
which is why now the argument, we should change this from a newspaper to a context paper, for example. It's no longer news, it's just giving now, for instance, if I use the same example, fine, the news was broken that this has happened, there is a death that's taken place, but now the context paper or the newspaper comes out to tell us what really happened, and then also remains relevant.
And also analysis, what does that mean?
Well, what does it mean?
Fidel died, what does that mean? And the national
teachers on strike for 2 weeks. No single media house has said what it has cost to the economy. That is what we should be doing as a work. That is what the discussion should have been on KTN. That if 280,000 teachers don't go to work for 1 week, this is what it costs. I mean, there is the new frontier of journalism that you should be championing.
And I guess also looking at some of those children, what are they up to right now? We've just come from a very long holiday for the children. What are they doing? Okay, we've had stories of some of them teaching others. We've had stories of volunteers who are coming out to teach, but also maybe balancing between the urban and the rural. What are the children in the rural area doing, for example?
And something I would want to know is how many days have students lost over the last few years to strikes? You know, I think that would be a crazy number.
Crazy
it really came out.
And the ultimate effect.
Sure.
Yeah. What effect does that have? If I have lost, say, for instance, 6 months out of all the strikes that we have had, what effect does that have on me as a student?
And as a competitive nation, you know, how are we competing to other nations when our students are being delayed months because of strikes?
Okay.
Sure. I was talking to a colleague of mine who sent the boy to school, high school. Then 3 days later he was back, and he had said he had spent all his money to pay fees, budget. He knew I can eat a slice of bread and go to bed. Now the boy is back in the house, you have to budget for him, and it's really a nightmare for parents. We're gonna spend more. And those are some of the stories we should be telling as journalists.
Yeah, the financial impact is just
even at home.
it's crashing. Because they already saved to pay for their school fees and for their needs. Now you also have to pay for them at home. And you're not going to get your money back for the school fees.
Sure.
That's not coming back.
And also, I guess, also not just the financial, but the social effect. Those children who are at home, maybe you already had programs for them to keep them busy over the holidays so that they don't get engaged in, you know, funny stuff. Now you're back to work and you had not budgeted. There are no camps. There is nowhere children can go for play or whatever, so they're just at home.
And you can't plan because you don't know when it's going to end. You can't plan and say, okay, I know he has to be with me for the next 1 week or 2 weeks. You don't know when it's going to end.
Okay, so I guess there's a lot that we can do in terms of highlighting the teacher strike and the effects. Not just the teacher's plight, not just TSC, the government, but also the child who is the one who's caught in between those two. All right, let's now move on to another story, and this is the rogue doctor, which of course, first of all, your take on just, you know, the story itself.
I think the story tells us that Kenya is lacking in policies and in bodies that can truly cover and analyze what's going on in the market. If it wasn't for that report, we would not have found out about what's going on. I wonder how many other cases there are like that in the country. I'm sure there are many more. I'm sure there are many more. So the bodies that are meant to oversee and go and inspect all these places, it seems like they're completely overwhelmed because as a result of our economic growth, so many opportunities of making money have come up, and some people are doing them without following the right procedures. So I think we really have to look at who is in charge of all these bodies and what capacity do they have to monitor what's going on. Because I am sure they don't have the capacity to go and look at every single hospital in Githurai or Zimmerman.
And all the small little clinics, because this being a case in point, it had the license had actually been withdrawn, but for some reason it still continued to practice. Ohito, your take on the story?
We are living in a rotten society. We are paying the price of corruption and weak structures and systems in our society. I think there should be law enforcement on these matters. It cannot be that this guy is still on the run. 4th day. And we have an Inspector General of Police, we have intelligence system that we pay with our taxes, and we have community leaders. No, it cannot happen that way anymore. But as the good lecturer friend of mine has said, how many more are happening? We're away from media cameras or public knowledge.
And I guess even the extent, because this was, of course, it's heinous what the doctor is doing, but we cannot also assume that there are not some who are rogue doctors who even go to a point of death, possibly, you know, some, you know, having death, because for him not to be qualified with no license, and with even one of the people interviewed, I think was his employee, who said she knew this was happening. Why do you think that somebody would keep quiet about that? Why not maybe have a space where they can come and even give us a report?
First of all, she's looking out for a job, that's where she eats. So as sad as that may sound, she doesn't want to jeopardize that. I think the doctor doing what he did, he wasn't even hiding. I mean, he had 2 clinics. It was not a secret what he was doing. It wasn't a secret that he had clinics. So there was a lack of follow-up in terms of the bodies that are supposed to know who's doing what. But this fits into a larger issue. We talked about context of follow-up in the entire county. I mean, how many times do we see a building fall, the owner runs, then after a few days that story dies? You know, they say they're looking for the owner, and they look for him seriously. After a few days, that story disappears from the media, and it disappears from our site. The same building comes back up again,
and nobody reports it. Do we drop the ball, Ohito, in terms of now following up on stories? Again, we cannot ignore the fact that it costs. It will cost the media house to have a reporter who's not bringing any story, you know, every day, but is literally just following up.
Yeah, to an extent I agree with what you said earlier, that we are knee-jerk even in terms of media. We will follow this clinic for the next few days, and then what happens thereafter, it's not our business anymore. And I think even those in law enforcement say, just give media time, they'll be all over this in a short time. It happened with NYS, it happened with the collapsed building. No, just give them time. The matatu that was caught in, was it in somewhere in central Kenya with students having drugs? What give it 2 days. It's very predictable.
Even my dress, my choice, you know,
hullabaloo. Yesterday we had a very candid conversation with Bob Colima, and he was telling us, you guys in Kenyan media, you need to change and shape up, because you run to issues like this and then touch and go. There's no really in-depth analysis what it means. We treat content with a lot of gloss, just on top, and then we move away. So he says, even for him as a leading empire in business in this region, he gets more value from our international competitors, BBC and Al Jazeera. And I think for me that was real good lesson for us to learn, and if at all we ever go ahead and learn. And I think we must really start looking at things in depth. We must start changing the way we present content, analyzing. And people are telling me, if they watch KTN News, that I like Chamwada's story, going behind, piecing together such kind of stories. They add more value than just saying we are live at this function and blah, blah, blah. It ends there. So we must go start analyzing content, adding value to our viewers and our readers every other day we are in office.
Kilemi, you're a lecturer at UON, and in terms of the kind of journalists that we are churning out, what is the view of the young people as they get into journalism? Because there are those, of course, who come with the idea that, oh, I want to be on the screen and, you know, be seen. But what really are we teaching them as journalists? What is the job of a journalist?
I think the classroom is an ideal place to learn journalism, because there are no limits of, there's no budget for that. That person, you can't go report that you won't get access. We are told you can do whatever you want to do. So you do get students who come out who are very passionate about wanting to be journalists. The problem often is the reality of the world as compared to the classroom. And there are some things, for example, as the editor would tell you, he would want to do a certain story, but maybe his budget for the month does not allow him to do so. So that limits what they can do. And if the only way around it is for newsrooms to dedicate certain amounts of money, a certain amount of space to these stories, because he will tell you, and you have reporters who are willing to do these stories, who are willing to do more than just a press conference or more than just a political rally, who want to go deeper into it, but they need to be allowed and given the space to do so.
Okay. Ohito, in terms of now this rogue doctor, what should we do just to avoid now dropping the ball, and after that, maybe 6 months later, we hear another one and suddenly we remember, oh, there was another one who, was caught doing the same thing. What should be the next plan for us as the press to ensure that this story does not drop for the sake of our...
We really need to go back and find out who owns this clinic. How was it licensed? There could be good stories from that clinic. Maybe guys who have been treated well and they say, I owe my life to this clinic. We must be able to go beyond just demonizing this guy, as much as whatever he did is not acceptable at all, should not be repeated anywhere. We need to get hold of those victims to tell us their stories. We have seen some TV stations have gone ahead and really done a good story to that end. But we are waiting to see also what the Cabinet Secretary Health will say and what action we will take. We do not want a repeat of what happened with the illicit brews, that you have an entire government, MPs running around pouring this brews. Right now they're back to their houses and offices, and the brews are back to business as usual. Can we really find lasting solutions to this?
I think in addition to what he's saying, there's only so much the media can do. You can highlight maybe 2 other stories like that. It has to really depend on the regulatory bodies that are in charge. The questions we should be asking is, why are they not doing their job? And if they have problems, what is being done to solve those issues that forces them not to be able to do their jobs as they're supposed to? Because this will happen. And I'm sure it's happening right now. It's happening in other counties. So unless the bodies that are in charge can easily and overwhelmingly cover the areas they're supposed to, it's going to continue happening.
All right, we'll take a short commercial break. When we come back, I want us to look at the Bungoma wheelbarrows. And yeah, your comments are still welcome right here on Morning Express. This is the Newsroom. We'll take a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
Gavana Sospita Ojamonga, Gavana wa Bungoma, Gavana wa Nyamira, Seneta wa Kilifi. Mgeni wangu studioni ni Ababu na Mwamba, msomi wa historia huko nchini. Kweli kwamba haujalipa suppliers?
Kweli hatujalipa suppliers, na sio shida yangu kama gavana. Hii imekuwa imejificha. Na sasa ndio watu wanaanza kuona sasa vile vifaa zinakuja.
Madam, kitu kilioko hii ni kateli ama hii ni wizi wa hali wa juu.
Kwa Bungoma tumenyanyaswa sana.
Hamna siku ambapo mtapata kuwa sasa kuna utukufu na utakatifu katika hii mipaka.
Tumieni fedha za ugatuzi kwa njia bora kufufua uchumi wa maeneo yenu.
Wasema ambao wanaufanya au tusaidii chochote. Hakuna barabara ambayo inatoka Isiolo inapitia IPT Meru.
Maombi yake anawasilisha kwa nani ndio apate fedha hizo?
Kama ni pesa za women enterprise ama youth enterprise, unaenda kwa district development officer.
Tuko hapa kwenye jukwaa la KTN kuangazia jinsi utendakazi unatekelezwa katika county.
Mimi ni Victor Ogale kutoka Kisumu na hii ni KTN News.
This is the Morning Express, and currently it is the Newsroom. We're looking at some of the big stories that have made the headlines. Some maybe should have made headlines and didn't. And also how we, members of the Fourth Estate, executed and did our job. Have we done justice to those stories? That's what we're talking about. In case you're joining us now, with me in the studio, we have Mwenda Kilemi, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and is lecturing in the Communications Department. We also have Standard Digital editor, David Ohito, and glad to have you gentlemen. Now, let's go to the Bungoma wheelbarrows, which, of course, was trending pretty much most of the day yesterday. And I think when I looked in the morning, this was at about 4:30, it was still one of the trending topics. In terms of your take in how we covered the story, again, it was on page, I think, 19. It was quite, towards the back. Did we miss it in terms of how we reported it? Should it have been a headline? Now, let's go to the Bungoma wheelbarrows, which, of course, was trending pretty much most of the day yesterday. And I think when I looked in the morning, this was at about 4:30, it was still one of the trending topics. In terms of your take in how we covered the story, again, it was on page, I think, 19. It was quite, towards the back. Did we miss it in terms of how we reported it? Should it have been a headline story, given the reaction that it received?
I think it took a more comical turn because of the ridiculousness of the amount he was spending on the wheelbarrow, and also his explanation didn't help. When he tried to explain himself, it was painful to watch that explanation. But a serious question has to be asked by the media of how they are spending their money. And I'm sure with enough reporting we can figure out crazier expenses like this going on. So we need to ask the question of how is this money being spent, and are they really being effective?
Okay. Ohito? Should it have been a story maybe towards page 3, for example?
Yes, I think, but I think the editors are also running at the challenges of how do you write a story better, which has been on social media trending as a top topic all over time. But the big question is, for me, 109,000 per wheelbarrow times 10 is hardly $1 million shillings. Counties are getting billions. The big question is for the reporters to go out, how did Bungoma spend the rest of its billions?
Yes.
And we are not even giving the true facts. Ken Lusaka was permanent secretary, a very accomplished administrator, and he was permanent secretary, Ministry of Livestock. So he knows where he should have gotten wheelbarrows anyway, if he needed some. And why didn't he even go for the cheaper plastic option? Though it is not the work of the governor, per se, to look at which pen are we buying and from what is it costing
There
us.
should be a procurement process.
There is a procurement process. But it shows how weak systems in counties may be exploited by a few individuals. I would not really want to blame the governor on this. We need to wake up to realities, but it's also a lesson for other governors to just find an independent eye, to just be looking at what we procured, how we procured it, were the systems followed, did we get value for our money? Those are the big questions. But you can see the citizen participation in their own affairs, that the people of Bungoma can go to the streets to protest about an expensive wheelbarrow. For me, that is democracy at work, and that is devolution at work. And we should not use that to demonize devolution. A very noble idea that is changing Kenyan communities across the 47 counties.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we must really start looking at how will we devolve civil societies? From Nairobi, they should stop sitting in Nairobi hotels and calling press conferences on Sunday. They must go out to the counties and start making noise with the communities in the counties to help communities to look at the budgets, look at the expenditure of counties. But as long as civil societies would want to stay in Nairobi and claim government is killing us, I think they're missing the point. They must go out and start addressing this. The media can only do
so
much. And I think the amount of air and response they gave the governor was not worth getting into that space. That was space wasted.
I think also it's just not been a good week for governors and counties. Yesterday there was also the issue in Kitengela with the people fighting over their land, saying they don't have enough land. So we are seeing some of the negative elements of devolution of government. But as we were talking about the break, I would like to see some of the positive elements. I'm sure there's some counties that are actually doing very well. I mean, it cannot be that all of them are going wrong. I'm sure there's some that are actually helping people, and the people are seeing a difference in their lives because now government is devolved. So it'd be good to also see that other side of the story.
Okay, Ohito, do you feel, what's the biggest story with this now, seeing that this particular devolved government has spent 109,000 shillings per wheelbarrow? What's the biggest story behind that? Because we can get sensational, and of course, like you mentioned, it took a very comical turn because of how ridiculous it sounds. But again, we cannot leave it at that. There must be a bigger story behind that.
The biggest story is that how do we hold people accountable? How do we spend public funds which have been entrusted with the counties? Are the people in the positions of procurement, for example, giving value for money for the mwananchi who is paying taxes through their noses? Are we having the right processes? And I'm pretty sure for a wheelbarrow to cost 109,000 and the MCS never saw it, the auditors never saw it, my good friend Edward Owuko never captured it. There must be many more 109,000 happening in bigger scales in counties. And those are the pointers we should start looking at. How really has Bungoma spent the billions? Bungoma is one of the biggest earners of devolution funds. I think it's among the top 5 earners, revenue earners from revenue division to the counties after Nairobi, Mandera, perhaps even bigger than Mombasa. So we should start looking at what else has Bungoma spent on.
And the accountability has to go up to the governors.
Sure.
As you said, some of these governors are very well accomplished in terms of managing money. They know what to do, yet they're not doing it at all. And I mean, the whole thing is just crazy because you often see a lot of governors in Nairobi, and you wonder how much time do they spend in their actual counties. I'd like to see a story about that, because many of them don't spend a lot of time there at home. They spend more time in Nairobi.
Sure. So press conference.
Yes, or just being around here. You know. So I'd like to know what really, I mean, how much time do they spend at work? What do they do? And the buck ultimately stops to them.
Okay, yeah. And in also painting a picture on the other side, because we could also end up looking at just the negative, yet like you mentioned, there are quite a number of counties that have seen positive elements of devolution. Maybe some of those counties have not been highlighted enough.
Yes, the biggest challenge, and which is why even the Bungoma story has to be in page 19 or beyond, is that we still operate as national newspapers. You're not operating as county newspapers. I know we have editions, both Nation Standard, we have editions, but that is not solving the issues. To the person in Bungoma and in Western Kenya, the wheelbarrow, of course.
That's the headline.
Yes, you don't need to tell me about some nightmares like we are seeing today. It doesn't really make sense. But they want to know issues that affect them. They have had enough of Nairobi. But the bigger question for me is not that 109,000 was spent on a wheelbarrow in Bungoma. In any case, this money was being spent on the same wheelbarrow in Nairobi for all the 50 years we were independent, and nobody ever questioned. And if you see the marvelous things happening in counties, you start wondering, where was this money going before we got to devolution? There is a lot of good work happening, especially the so-called marginalized counties. You go to Mandera, go to Wajir, go to Tana River. There are good, positive success stories and how counties are changing lives of people. People are getting services closer, and that you can go to a governor and not to the president to ask that we need an upgrade of our school. People are participating more in development issues, and people are questioning more how their funds are being spent. You know, if you're told this road costs, even if you never went to school and you're told this is the cost, those people who are protesting, many of them do not even own wheelbarrows. They don't know the price of wheelbarrows, but they pass by hardware and see it is 4,000 bob. And that is why they're making noise. What happened? Why did
it move from 4,000 to 109,000?
And that is participatory in democracy, participation in democracy, and in the affairs of the development. So I think going forward, the media must really reinvent itself, be prepared to cover all the 47 counties in a fair, balanced way. Because I'm very sure the Bungoma one you will see. But what about the positive stories of Bungoma? Where are they? We are waiting to look
to see that. Sure. All right, let's move on to something else. And just recently we had huge success in Beijing. With our athletes coming back, and there was, of course, you know, everybody was very happy about it. But just last weekend, we had Harambee Stars playing, and I think there were huge numbers of Kenyans who went to the stadium. But however, it didn't go well. We lost. And in terms of now reporting sports, do we do justice to our sports?
We talked about this last week, and I mentioned there is a problem in our country when it comes to individual sports. Kenyans do very well. When it comes to organized sports, we just cannot perform.
It crumbles.
Yeah. So we have to, then they have to ask questions about the bodies in charge of those professional sports. What is it about them? Because these players, I mean, are some of the, are sought after in the world. So individually, when they go to play for their clubs, they play well. How come when they're forced or when they're told to play for Kenya, they don't perform? So a question has to be asked about the professional bodies that run these organizations.
Okay. Ohito, in terms of our reportage on sports?
We did poorly on sports coverage, especially at Harambee Stars. And I really had a run-in with some of our sports writers and editors. How the hell could we, first of all, allow people who have never played football for the last 2, 3, 4 years, people like Oliech, to be included in the national squad?
Just because they play for...
Yes, and from where I sat, I said, I think this old network, it works in football. I think I'm twisted the coach that this is the lineup you have to play with. And we denied young boys who play for Chemelil, Tusker, local leagues, a chance to really showcase their talent. How would you pick Oregi, who has not played any competitive football, to be in charge of the 2 posts? Those were begging questions. And when one newspaper, let me say the Standard, went on rating players, and I saw somebody gave a Oliech 4 out of 10, then I say, I think we've just missed the point. and we are insulting the intelligence of readers. We did not do due diligence on the fitness of even our own players, and we didn't do a thorough post-match analysis on why Harambee Stars lost on home soil to a 30,000 crowd. That story was not captured. And today, as you saw, we already buried the Harambee Stars story, and you look at the headlines we've carried, we've gone back to European teams. Why would Victor Wanyama play so well for Soton and not do the same for his motherland? You know, those are begging questions that you don't need to go to anybody's school or a sports academy to ask. So, on sports front, I think the entire media, we failed.
Okay. Mwenda?
Well, I'll defend the media a bit, because they have tried to cover issues that are going on in football, like issues of pay, issue of disorganization. But we do have, our media do have a bend towards European football. We don't cover our football as glamorously as we do.
Is that because of a need that is out there? Maybe that's what people are interested in, or is it because we ourselves are not patriotic enough to follow our own football?
I think there has to be, this is completely on the media, there has to be an attempt to try and publicize and popularize our own sports. It cannot be that kids can mention the entire Manchester United squad, but they don't even know who plays for Harambee Stars.
Can mention 3 players.
Yeah. Although again, the other issue might be the main big players. One of the issues that we have is violence after the game. So as much as you'd like to even go with your children for the game to try and publicize it to them and let them, you know, have that love for the national team or some of the, you know, local league teams, the issue is violence.
And the funny thing about it, every single time they know there's going to be violence in the sports, and it still happens. Every single time they know the matches that are going to have issues or they're prone to violence.
And it still happens.
And it still happens. They're given suggestions, separate them. They don't separate them.
Sure, and it's been also a question. You see, in the international media, violent scenes are no longer covered, even if it's live on TV. Once it breaks out, the cameras are moved away from that. But in print, we still, you know, glorify violence, and which gives some credence to some of these criminals to really say, I know if I throw the stone and because KLV will be on the papers. And that's what they want to achieve.
They can actually dramatize this.
And to add to what you said, unless it's sanitized, there is no way it's going to become a popular sport in Kenya. Because a parent has to say, I can take my kid to this match. Because financially, that's when it will make sense. Even for the teams, because they'll make more money from attendance. The kid will buy merchandise. But also, the kid will be more in love with the sport because he has attended the match. He doesn't see it on TV or hears about it. So until...
And even in terms of growing the sport, for that child to see that is a football star in Kenya, they will want to do that. But right now, we don't really have that because you think of football, you think hooligans. So really, that's not a sport.
But the other aspect, we have to look at the international things. When the likes of Victor Wanyama are released by their teams to come for these home games, there's a very stern warning from the managers. They said, you pick up an injury, you sure I'll not field you. So they don't play at 100%. So he would not take a tackle that would earn him.
And sometimes he has to pay for his ticket back home anyway. So he's coming here relaxed.
So there are issues. Those issues, I guess, need to be highlighted by the media. You need to pick them up and find out. Find them.
How much preparation did we do? I was looking at a story that would tell me that the national team to assemble it here, we have spent this much. This player has his allowance already in his bank account.
Gentlemen, I am told time is up. We really have to wind up. Thank you very much. David Ohito, who is the Standard Digital Editor. Thank you for joining us. And also Mwenda Kilemi, who is a lecturer with the University of Nairobi. That's where we're going to wind up Newsroom and Morning Express.